Over the past 35 years, we have gotten 17 mainline Fire Emblem games. And with the 18th game, Fortune's Weave, on the way, I thought it would be fun to look back at some of the various games released before in this franchise to see what can be learned from these games. Both the good and the bad to create what, for me, would be the greatest Fire Emblem game in existence. This time, I want to look at Three Houses and Engage, and maybe a little bit of Fates, as both Three Houses and Engage are almost seen as polar opposites in the community, with Three Houses being lauded for its characters and world building, and often criticized for its gameplay and map design. Meanwhile, Engage is praised for its tactical gameplay, and most people would rather just ignore the story entirely. Anyways, let's go right on in to point one. Number one, the most important thing to get right is the writing itself. To call the story of Three Houses perfect would certainly be a lie, but many would agree the character writing in the game is top-notch, and when people love the characters, they are willing to overlook plot flaws, contrivances, and cliches. Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia is further proof to this point, as it has one of the most cliched stories in Fire Emblem, but most people don't mind because the characters are so likable, and the writing itself is good, meaning that people get attached to these characters in this world. Where Engage truly failed on a story front is its characters and world building, as at the end of the day, the game's plot is fairly standard by Fire Emblem standards, but people weren't able to connect with the characters, and the world itself felt so artificial. Three Houses has a large, lived-in world where the characters and their families and the countries are all so intertwined with each other in the world that every character is significant. People have been able to make whole video essays on characters like Dimitri and Edelgard, their families, their family lines, their family's actions, as well as the direct consequences that these characters and their families have had on the world as a whole, and how the world's history has built into how these characters behave and act. And obviously those are main characters, but people have also done that with smaller characters. Like, I'm sure if you checked on YouTube, you could probably find one of those video essays on someone like Ignatz, someone that most people don't pay attention to. On the flip side, I can't think of any examples of the character's impact on the world and vice versa in Engage. Yeah, some of the countries have had a history of warring, but little time is focused on that, and ultimately has little impact on the characters or the story. Dima and Ivy's relationship, despite them being from those two warring nations, their supporters don't focus on that fact at all. Contrast that to the relationship between Dimitri and Edelgard, or even to Dimitri and Felix, there is nothing with the characters in Engage. Number two, don't bring back the calendar system. The biggest issue in Three Houses is easily its tie to the calendar. Not only does this make the story predictable by always having everything important take place at the end of the month, it ruins pacing. An example of this being Chapter 6, where you can save Manuela instantly at the beginning of the month, or for no good story reason, you can just hold it off till the end of the month for the mission. And the calendar also further builds emphasis on some of my other least favorite aspects of Three Houses, namely the class system and the hub. Number three, speaking of, make the class system more linear. Three Houses easily has my least favorite class system in the franchise, as I believe it is too open, and when anyone can be literally anything, it makes both the class and the character less unique. Think of Cavalry in Fire Emblem 4. A unit being on a horse makes such an impact. You remember those characters because of the contributions they play in the army. Azel was so memorable, not just for his story, but for the fact that he gets a horse on promotion. There's nothing like that in Three Houses. While Engage's class system isn't perfect, it is so much better than Three Houses, as everyone has a default class, unlike Three Houses where most people just start out as commoner or noble. But Engage's, everyone has a default class with branching promotions from a preset list on top of that, And if you don't want to use one of those classes, you can also use one of the various reclass seals in the game to reclass. I also hate how the teaching mechanic and the calendar are intertwined with being able to promote and reclass units in 3 houses. I find it such a pain to micromanage who is learning what weapon skill, and by the time I'm done with each route, I am so sick of teaching people. In fact, I think the main point of reference for reclassing should always be Fire Emblem Fates. Not only does it have a wide variety of classes at the start, everyone has a branching promotion, and its reclassing is more limited and gives direct gameplay benefit for supports with the heart seals, partner seals. All of those seals are tied directly to your supports with various characters. And I can't think of any direct gameplay benefit from character-to-character supports in both 3 houses and Engage. Number 4, less focus on hubs. Hubs have existed in Fire Emblem since Fates, and funnily enough, have only gotten worse since then. While Engage fixed a majority of my issues with 3 houses' Garruk Monastery, the Somniel still isn't good. In 3 houses, the monastery is an essential part of the playthrough, at least on the first run of every route, as this is where all character recruitment is done. Byleth learns weapon skills from the other adults, does side quests, and this is all around a pain due to the monastery's size and its lack of a menu alternative. The whole thing is a slog and slows down the entire Fire Emblem experience. While Engage's Somniel feels way less mandatory, it is still riddled with useless and unfun minigames that just don't need to be there. Especially when one of the few useful things, the character bonding activities, which can help you build supports, weren't in the Somniel at game release. Something that both games have failed at is knowing that less is more. 3 houses primarily fails with the class system in the monastery, but Engage fails by bloating the Somniel. Number 5, speaking of which, less is more. An example of that working, in my opinion, is actually the lack of weapon durability in Engage. When the game is designed for it, weapon durability is phenomenal. Games like Thracia have such a tight economy that every weapon use matters, but in 3 houses, changing out weapons every month was just a chore as durability was low, you went through durability really fast because of combat arts, and the player's amount of money was sky high. A bad example of less is more in Engage is the bond conversations. Every emblem has 3 levels of support conversations with every unit, and while some of these conversations are actually really cool, most are so forgettable and short that they just feel like they are there to exist. Something that can be done in Fortune's Weave to build off of less is more is adding a menu alternative to the hub. That is so much less than a giant hub. It'd be so much faster, and I know for many players like myself, I would like 3 houses a whole lot more if everything that could be done in the monastery I could do in a menu, is that would just speed up the whole monastery process and streamline the game experience. Number 6, either fully commit to the avatar or remove it. Avatars can be a lot of fun when they are actually customizable. In 3 houses and Engage, they are more of a nuisance to me. While I don't think a self-insert with the ability to choose gender should be taken out, in fact, I think that those are very important parts to a modern gaming experience. If all you can do is change the gender, I don't think they should bother letting you rename the character, as all that does is get in the way of voiced lines, leading to extremely annoying alternatives like Divine Dragon, Divine Dragon, Divine Dragon, Professor, Professor, hey Professor, etc. on repeat for 20 to 60 hours of gameplay. Keeping the ability to choose gender, however, is a good thing to keep, as it does give the player a more meaningful way to interact with other characters through things like S supports, as some people really love being able to play main characters with a similar gender identity to them. And you don't have to keep the avatar to have a self-insert either. Ike is the self-insert in Path of Radiance. He goes into the world knowing nothing about it, just like the player. So the player learns about the world of Tellius through Ike's eyes. He is the self-insert without being an avatar. And I feel that's what should be done in the future. Number 7, While I would love more varied victory conditions, interesting design choices can take their place. One of the main complaints people have with Three Houses gameplay is the lack of varied objectives. The funny part is, Engage's maps don't have many unique objectives either. The map design is just more engaging on its own. One reason for that is giving each map a unique gameplay purpose. Chapter 11 in Engage is fun, not just because it is an escape map, but because the game takes away all your toys and you have to fend for yourself and learn to adapt. Chapter 25 is another great example, as well. It is just a defeat boss map. The constant reinforcements and the crystal area of effect gimmick makes the player have to play the map really fast and more like an escape map. An example of a map I despise Engage is Chapter 22. Chapter 22 starts out alright when the objective is just to pick up all the emblem rings again, but it is immediately ruined by turning the map into a defeat all enemies map, as by the time you get all the rings, you've already been around the entire map. You've gone through it all. The terrain isn't that interesting, and none of the enemies are that interesting, being just generic monsters. It is an overly large map that overstays its welcome by adding a whole second condition. Number 8. That isn't to say that varied victory conditions aren't good too. Well, great map design can make up for the lack of unique objectives. That doesn't mean there shouldn't be unique objectives. And if you took the great map design of something like Engage Chapter 25 and put that same care into a unique condition, you can have something truly great. This is why people love Fate's Conquest, as most of that game not only has engaging map design, but also utilizes various objectives. Conquest Chapter 10 is such a tightly made map. Every element in that map serves a purpose building towards the map's defense objective. And the maps in Fates that don't have varied conditions at least have gimmicks in them. Ninja Hell has the spikes. In Chapter 24, Hinoka has the flyer dragon veins, where the dragon veins change either the speed of which the flyers move or the non-flyers move, with one having extended movement and the other having shortened movement. Number 9. New on-map gimmicks separate different Fire Emblems, and when done right, are fantastic tactical additions. Every game since Awakening have added a new on-map gimmick that helps make the gameplay stand out and gives the player a new tool to use in combat. And while some of these gimmicks have returned, when they've returned, they've always been refined. Take, for example, Pair Up. Pair Up was a new on-map gimmick added in Awakening, and then further refined in Fates. In addition to refining Pair Up, Fates added Dragon Veins, which completely can change how you play a map. Shadows of Valentia introduced combat arts. And Three Houses took combat arts, refined them, and then added battalions and their gambits in addition. This brings us to Fire Emblem Engage, which added the engage mechanic, and importantly, the break mechanic. We already know that combat arts and gambits are going to be returning in Fortune's Weave. And while many would agree that combat arts were great in Three Houses and mostly could just be brought over unchanged, I know I'd love to see gambits refined, particularly taking more from the engage mechanic. Is the engage mechanic on its own feels like a different take on a same idea, with both having innate benefits just for having them equipped, as well as special actions that you can take in a limited amount of time. Like you have the Dance Gambit in Three Houses, and you have the Byleth emblem in Engage. And I'd also love to see Break return and be further developed. This brings me to the point of this point. If they can add something even half as engaging as the Break mechanic in this game, that will elevate this game's combat tenfold. I'm also curious to see if the new Blaze Arts and Blaze Gauge take on the role of this game's new on-map gimmick, or if they're just a slightly different combat art. Number 10. Finally, make all choices actually matter. I love Three Houses, but it never actually feels like choices matter. Right off the bat, Sothis asks you what you are, and the game gives you 3 choices: Ghost, Demon, and Mortal. If you choose anything other than Mortal, Sothis says,
Do not deceive.
You get a choice in Azure Moon on whether to approach Endbar from the east or the west. If you choose to approach from the west, the characters make fun of you. And you might be saying, what about the initial house choice or the Crimson Flower Silver Snow split? Well, the thing is, all the routes are almost identical in gameplay and even in plot to a degree. Verdant Wind and Silver Snow are almost carbon copies of each other with a different final map, a different cast, a slightly different story. Only 2 maps are different between the 2 of them. The final maps, and the fact that Silver Snow does not have a second Grunder Fields map. Azure Moon isn't that different either from those other 2, other than the fact you never directly deal with the Agarthans. If the maps play dramatically different, this wouldn't be a problem, but they don't. Even Crimson Flower, a lot of the maps are reused from other routes, and maybe from paralogs and not the main story, but the only difference is that you start from the opposite direction with little other difference. Compared to Fates, where not only are the stories wildly different in plot and quality, but there are also very few reused maps in Fates, and even the ones that are reused in Fates, they play so dramatically different that feels like the choice and route truly matters. And while I don't think Fortune's Weave will have a major route split, I hope in general that the player's choices matter. If you look at it on a small scale, Erica and Ephraim's routes feel so different, and they even slightly change the story after they reconvene. And even the minor route splits in the Olymp games, which are determined by visiting one house over the other, or maybe using certain units and not others, having route splits that are determined by that give consequences to your actions. If I use my flyers more than my Sakaean units, I'll go in a different route in the late game in Binding Blade, and that completely changes the experience. So those are the 10 things that I think can be learned from 3 houses in Engage, and a little bit of Fates as well, to help make the best Fire Emblem game possible. If I missed anything that you really think should be learned from these games, let me know, as I'd love to talk with you about it in the comments down below. Anyways, thanks for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.